In 2007, Steve Jobs unveiled the very first iPhone. It had a 30-pin dock connector, a headphone jack, a volume rocker, a mute switch, and this, a 2-megapixel camera. A camera that would grow and grow and grow into 7 lenses of endless photographic possibilities. This is the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and after taking 1,000 photos on this $1,200 system, I can say without a doubt that it is the best camera Apple has ever built. But if it's really for pros, it's missing one big thing. I'm Becca. Welcome back to Full Frame. Here I go. The thing the iPhone 15 Pro Max is finally not missing is a viable telephoto lens. The 5x 120mm telephoto lens on the iPhone 15 Pro Max is great, and it is a welcome change from the 3x zoom on the iPhone 14 Pro Max and even the iPhone 15 Pro, which is around 77mm. It is of course not as far-reaching as Samsung's S23 Ultra with its 10x or 230mm lens, and therefore it doesn't flatten out the image quite as much, and it's not as sharp in perfect light either, but like the S23 Ultra, the iPhone's telephoto lens features optical image stabilization, which keeps photos not blurry despite the longer focal length. At night though, the telephoto lens's small sensor creates a good deal of noise, and in some situations the iPhone 15 Pro Max will automatically crop the main sensor instead of using the telephoto, and there is no way to override this choice in the native camera app. But outside of the telephoto lens, on the hardware side, there isn't a whole lot new here. There is a new lens coating for less reflections at night, which I'm happy to report there are less reflections, although still some, and Apple claims low-light portrait shots are made better by using a LiDAR scanner, which I'll come back to shortly. And of course, there's a USB-C port and an action button, which I immediately set to open the camera, obvi, but this is purely playing catch-up to Android, where double-tapping the power button launches the camera. And thank God! I do wish the action button was below the volume rockers though. It is far too high for a phone this large. Apple's doing even more on the software side this year, but more on that in a moment. First, a message from our sponsor.
Thanks, Becca. Out here in Southern California, we're all about putting the top down, feeling the breeze, and finding our next adventure in the new 2024 Jeep Wrangler. It gives you the freedom to choose your adventure anytime and anywhere. The latest model has a huge 12.3-inch touchscreen, and the 4xe hybrid model is the most capable Wrangler ever. Now, Jeep doesn't influence our editorial, but they do help us make videos like this possible. All right, that's for me. Back to y'all.
I've made it! Apple is, of course, touting the fact that users now have access to quote-unquote 7 different lenses on the 15 Pro Max. So there are 3 native lenses, the 13mm 12-megapixel ultra-wide, the 24mm 48-megapixel main lens, and the new 120mm 12-megapixel telephoto lens. Then, using Deep Fusion and a special pipeline, as Apple likes to call it, 3 other lenses are unlocked, you could say. There's the 28mm, the 35mm, and the 48mm that all use the 48-megapixel main sensor. And I'm going to use 2 words about these quote-unquote lenses that I don't often use with Apple's camera systems. The new lenses are fun, and they are accessible. I've become so used to tools being hidden behind confusing UI, like a deep settings menu or this horrible arrow that unlocks camera controls. But these lenses, they are right at your fingertips. And quickly, I was playing around with framing and focal lengths far more than I usually do. The problem is they're not really different lenses. Like when I put a 50mm lens on this Sony a7R Mark IV, for example, the photos have a different feeling than when I put the 24mm on. Typically, the longer the lens, the flatter the image is going to be, and when you put something wide, like a 24 on, there might be a little warping on the edges. So no matter how good your image pipeline is, you are just cropping a sensor at the end of the day. And obviously, the iPhone 15 Pro Max cannot replicate the amount of detail that you'll get from a full-frame camera. This phone loves faces. I've never driven in sand before. When the iPhone 15 Pro Max detects the face of a human, a cat, or a dog, a small F will appear at the bottom left-hand side of the frame, meaning that the camera is automatically saving depth information with the photo, which means that after the photo is taken, you can apply the portrait effect. It also will do this anytime you tap on the frame. Samsung has had a similar feature for many years, and Samsung still has a better cutout around faces. But folks, we gotta go easy on our iOS friends. This is new to them. They are very excited. Let's let them have this moment. What's more exciting though is how much better the iPhone has gotten at taking photos of people at night with its new LiDAR sensor. What the perfect time to Pixel 7 Pro once reigned supreme in this department, but now the iPhone makes those photos look dark and not as sharp. It's a huge win for Apple, and even though these images border on too contrasty and at times over-sharpened, especially on a larger screen, they look great for social. But when there is not a face in the frame, the iPhone's low-light performance leaves a bit to be desired. Photos simply aren't as sharp as the Pixels. But surprisingly, even with a maximum 30-second exposure, the 15 Pro Max did incredibly well at capturing the stars, giving the Pixel 7 Pro's Astro mode a run for its money. Digital lenses and better night portraits are great, but this system's shining achievement is its video quality.
I got my sick desert shades on, and I'm ready to go.
Apple has always produced great video that is true to life and color and sharp without being crunchy.
I'll hike the East Coast till I die, but this is pretty cool. Parallaxing mountains. Look at all them rocks. And chunks of crystals. I could bring this back to Brooklyn and make a small fortune.
But new this year are two very pro features: ProRes Log and the ability to plug in a hard drive or SD card via the USB-C port. Log footage is helpful for color matching footage to other cameras or having more dynamic range. Basically, you aren't stuck with Apple's color profile baked into your footage. Just be aware that in low light situations, there is a good deal of grain. Having a USB-C port allows for faster transfer speeds, which means you can write directly to an external drive. Once you have a drive connected and are shooting in ProRes, a USB-C label will appear at the bottom of the camera app to indicate it's writing to the drive. This also unlocks 4K 60 frames per second ProRes Log shooting. Hi, Edit Becca here. It's good to see you. Oh my gosh, how have you been? Anyway, thanks for tuning in. You may notice that my 4K 60 frames per second video is not 60 frames per second. That's because while I was out roaming free in the desert, I was using the wrong cable. In fact, a cable that isn't fast enough. And at no time did the 15 Pro Max tell me that my tech wasn't up to spec. So when I got back and into the edit, and all my footage was choppy, I was just left sad. Really, really sad. And now I'm in an ugly office and it's nighttime out. And so, here's some footage of me spinning in a chair to prove that you can shoot 4K 60 ProRes. You just need to have all of the right things, and you need to know that you have the right things because the camera will not tell you. All right, back to the video. For folks looking for smaller file sizes in perfect lighting conditions, the 4K 20 frames per second video quality is great. And as a few folks online have pointed out, action mode, which further stabilizes your footage, is perfectly paired with the new telephoto lens. This feature is not available at night though. When the sun sets, the main lens is able to hold onto the blacks and provide a decent image, but the ultrawide continues to be far too dark, and the telephoto lens falls into a grainy mess. I haven't spent a lot of time talking about color science, sharpness, or contrast. And that's because it's great. I mean, it's always been great. This is kind of amazing. Check this out. When you put the 15 Pro Max's photos next to photos from the very first iPhone, the quality has of course improved, but they both produce pleasing images. And I don't know, that first iPhone just has this nice kind of like filmic quality to it. Plus it's such a joy to use. It's just so cute. Okay, back to the iPhone 15 Pro Max. As per usual with Apple's camera systems, colors are vivid without slapping you in the face, and there's a good amount of contrast without losing details in the shadows. And like last year, the 48 megapixel RAW photos provide an amazing amount of detail. What everyone is calling a slow year of advancements in the iPhone lineup is far from true for the 15 Pro Max's camera system. Willy-nilly use of the word lenses aside, having more framing options is great. The video quality is the best you can get on a smartphone, and always having portrait mode without having to tell everyone, use portrait mode, is very much welcomed. Not to mention, portraits of people at night look much better. But the missing thing, what is the missing thing, Becca? Come on! It's control. If this really wants to be a professional camera, you should be able to operate it as such natively. I spoke earlier about being able to film and log and color your footage to your liking. The problem is you can't record your footage to your liking. And yes, there are great apps that allow full manual control, but I don't understand what is keeping Apple from building it in. If I can shoot 4K 60 frames per second ProRes log video to an external drive, I should be able to rack my own focus, set my own ISO, or change the white balance even. Relying solely on the camera system to make these decisions is anything but pro. And this just feels like the missing puzzle piece to an otherwise very capable system. And while you're at it, it's time to put all the camera settings into the camera app.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Next day.
We are lost in the desert, out of water. Becca just went off a cliff and it's 110 degrees outside. Man, I wish I could call for help, but I don't have the iPhone 15, so